But welcome from me, Chandradasa, from the Buddhist Central Online team. I'm really enjoying these kind of Saturday, for me it's Saturday lunchtime, so it's a delightful way to do your lunchtime. Conversations with my friend Paramananda and various friends of his, various guests. We've enjoyed conversations with Padmamati and last week with Daya Jyoti. This week, I'm really happy to welcome Maitri Devi, who I do actually know a bit. I haven't seen her for a long time in person, but we have worked together online during the pandemic, which was fabulous when Taraloka did a home retreat for the Buddhist Central Online, Alive, Aware, Awake. I had great fun working with their team on Zoom, sort of trying to figure it all out as we went, making it up as we went along. And I have actually known Maitri Devi, I think, since 1996. Which feels like an awful long time ago, doesn't it? Maitri Devi is so long ago.
You were so young back then.
And so were you. I remember you told me I looked like Frodo Baggins from the Lord of the Rings movie, and I was like, oh my goodness, that's my favourite person.
I would never have said that.
You did so. Anyway, it's lovely to have you with us, Maitri Devi. There are many associations with Maitri Devi one could speak to. I'm going to leave much of that to Paramananda. I guess in more recent years, my association with Maitri Devi is a lot to do with Buddhafield, actually, and both the total immersion retreats at Buddhafield, but also the festival. And that's an aspect of her love of nature, for which she is well known. If you don't know, Maitri Devi's now resident at Taraloka Retreat Centre, and she's been producing these amazing videos through lockdown from the garden at Taraloka. And they're not just beautiful, they are beautiful. So it's worth just looking if you want a kind of nature hit from your lockdown situation. But actually it's the kind of the depth of reflection in them. Her new series is called Awakening with Trees, is that right? And there's a whole previous series with birds. And is there anything better than Dharma reflections, basically located in the world of nature and animals, etc. Anyway, so I love watching that stuff with Maitri Devi. It's great to see Taraloka in such good hands as Maitri Devi's. Creative, wonderful, alive, aware, awake. No better introduction. So thanks for being with us, Maitri Devi. And thanks, Paramanda, for hosting this series again. I love working with you too.
Thank you, Chandradasa. Yes, I'm very pleased this week to have Maitri Devi here virtually with me. I'm not going to give a history of Maitri Devi's time in Sri Ratna, but it goes back quite a long way, and for nearly 20 years she was worked in team-based right livelihood for Windhorse
Evolution
shop people, and she was quite a lot of that time one of the directors, she was financial director. And when she left that, she had a little bit of time off, and then went to Taraloka, and she's been there for the last 6 years. Most of them, I think she more or less immediately became chairperson at Taraloka. And a lot of you, well, a lot of the women will know Taraloka as one of the main, well, it's really the main retreat centre for women in England. It plays a very important part. I know Maitri Devi best through the Buddhafield Total Immersion retreats, which she's been on probably as many of them as anybody, actually. She's one of the most regular people on the month-long retreats. And she's also co-led some of them with myself. And so that's how I got to know her, really, on those retreats. And she's particularly fantastic to go for a walk with, because you go for a walk with Maitri Devi in the countryside, she will tell you what all the different birds are. She can identify all the bird song and stuff. I find that very impressive and very enjoyable. Anyway, so she's got quite a, I don't know if this will come out in this particular conversation, but she's got quite a vivid internal life. So she's both got a very strong connection with the natural world, but also quite a strong connection with a kind of inner world. And those two, I think, kind of interpenetrate in quite interesting ways. You might get a sense of that this afternoon. So anyway, I'm very pleased to have her here. And as with all our guests, I've asked Maitri Devi to bring something along to share and kind of kick us off. So I'm going to hand over to Maitri Devi to start us off in our conversation.
Thanks, Paramanda. Thanks. Lovely introduction. So I've got a poem to kick us off, and it's not a poem I knew before about 10 days ago. I just stumbled across it, and it kind of lodged in my throat a bit. So it's probably quite, I think it might be quite well known, but I didn't know it. So it's by W.S. Merwin. It's called Thank You. Listen. With the night falling, we are saying thank you. We are stopping on the bridges to bow from the railings. We are running out of the glass rooms with our mouths full of food to look at the sky and say thank you. We are standing by the water, looking out in different directions. Back from a series of hospitals, back from a mugging, after funerals. We're saying thank you. After the news of the dead, whether or not we knew them, we are saying thank you. Looking up from tables, we are saying thank you. In the culture up to its chin in shame, living in the stench it has chosen, we are saying thank you. Over telephones, we are saying thank you. In doorways, and in the backs of cars, and in elevators, remembering wars and the police at the back door and the beatings on the stairs, we're saying thank you. In the banks that use us, we're saying thank you. With the crooks in office, with the rich and fashionable unchanged, we go on saying thank you. Thank you. With the animals dying around us, our lost feelings, we are saying thank you. With the forests falling faster than the minutes of our lives, we are saying thank you. With the words going out like cells of a brain and the cities growing over us like the earth, we are saying thank you faster and faster. With nobody listening, we're saying thank you. We're saying thank you and waving, dark though it is.
Well, thank you, because such a strong, I've never heard that poem actually before, and such a strong piece of work. And somehow, I'm not surprised when I heard you say it stuck in your throat. I mean, I'm a bit inclined to say, well, we'll just leave it there, you know. that's enough, really.
Yeah.
you know, Christ, you know, that's enough. And I mean, when was that written? He's not. He's a while ago.
I think it was the late. Oh, it was the 80s sometime. I'm not quite. Maybe 88 or something.
I was thinking a bit earlier than that, but it certainly sounds like that. But I mean, very. It seems particularly poignant, doesn't it, at the moment? Somehow, you know.
I kept reading it, and it just kept being relevant in different ways and speaking in different ways. Yeah.
So, well, isn't that?
Mm.
What's I don't know, well, I don't really like analysing poems, but I suppose the question that comes to me, I mean, we're just saying thank you for life. Is that what you took from it? I mean, what?
Yes, well, I think that first time, I think what I responded to the thank you was sort of almost, regardless of what's happening and how things are going. Here we are in this most extraordinary world, and actually the only thing you can do is say thank you in some ways, or like there's no reason ever to stop saying thank you, or there's something about appreciating even as things disappear, just that sense of deep appreciation. Yeah
Gratitude, isn't it? Having, I mean, it's such an interesting thing, isn't it? Because if you lose that sense of gratitude for your life, it's a very dark place, isn't it?
I think, I mean, I've always, this is, it's right in the middle of springtime, and I think I just love spring. And a couple of years ago, the swallows stopped coming to Taraloka, probably for the first time since the property was built, I imagine. And it made, I was quite depressed. It made that spring really difficult, and the one after, actually. And but I think I just thought, well, actually, everything else is still happening. It was back to this sense of actually just need to appreciate it, because actually I don't know if this is the last time the swallows will come, or the last time the curlews will come back, or the last time the ash tree up by the bridge, which has got dieback, is going to be there. So yeah, I think that's what I mean, that appreciation even as things disappear.
Yeah, I mean, everything disappears, doesn't it, in the end?
I think there's that way of reflecting on impermanence, isn't there? I think I associate it with the Dalai Lama, so it must come from the Tibetan tradition about the end of something being in its arising, noticing that. Yeah.
So it's quite hard to kind of move on from there in a certain sort of way, isn't it? Because it's straight into what seems to be at the core, both of practice, our practice, Buddhist practice, but also the core of humanity in a way. What it means to be human, really. Because of course, it's not just things. When you say now, I'm thinking, well, we don't last very long, do we? we don't last very long. And when you're saying we don't know if the Swifts are going to be back, or you don't know if the ash tree's going to make it through, well, we don't know if we're going to make it through, do we?
Mm.
And although we push that, I suppose that's part of it, isn't it? I mean, I've wondered this before, if our inability to really grasp our own impermanence or our own mortality, whether our inability to really grasp our own makes it difficult for us to really appreciate that on a planetary or a social level, you know, on a bigger level. I wonder what the relationship between that is, you know, to the extent that we're in denial about our own mortality. How does that bleed across to kind of denial about planetary extinction or whatever, you know? I don't know. Do you? No.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering, because, well, we are in denial about our own mortality, but also kind of obsessed about it, you know, sort of behind that is a sort of obsession. And I almost want, you know, I wonder whether that, the sort of almost our self-obsession is what blocks that understanding that everything else too, everything else too is going. I don't know.
I've been thinking about this lately and thinking that I mean, I don't know, because it's the only age I've ever lived in, isn't it? But I can't help feeling that we're in a very narcissistic kind of culture now. And we don't really have this perspective, do we, of, you know, like the old Celtic idea that everything's done with the 7 generations in mind or whatever, you know. You know, we don't really seem to be that conscious of being within a tradition of ancestral tradition in a way, you know. It's our lives, isn't it? And I wonder how difficult that makes it for us, you know. How atomized we are in a way, and I wonder, I mean, I don't know if you've got any feelings about it, but do you think meditation offers a way of overcoming, might be too strong, but at least mitigating against that kind of narcissistic tendency that we all have? Well, I say we all have. I shouldn't say we all have. I don't know.
It's probably it's probably not unreasonable, is it? I mean, at some point, narcissism just fades into sort of self-obsession. You know, just a fixed idea of self, doesn't it? It all kind of, it's on the same spectrum, isn't it? I mean, I you know, I think yes, meditation does have something to offer, and also, I mean, we're all capable of using it in a way that just almost reinforces that narcissism, aren't we? You know, it's like you can use meditation and become super sensitive to everything, but in a very self-referential way. I mean, I noticed this with myself, how I can meditate in a way that sort of feels like it becomes more insular, or it's more closed off, or I can open out. And in a way, it's the context that I imagine myself meditating in that it feels like it's an important part of the practice. So, yeah, the significance I give it, I suppose.
No, I'm so pleased to hear you say that, because increasingly I think it is a practice in a way, you know, or it's an essential part of the practice. It's not an optional, you know, that we always meditate in a real place, don't we? We meditate in the real world. And if we're not meditating in the real world, what are we actually doing? Is it some kind of fantasy thing, you know? And I find, sorry. Yeah.
Something I've been, I think I seem to be quite obsessed by Earth at the moment. And something I've been playing around with is just understanding or reminding myself that the Earth that I'm sitting on is alive. Is alive, rather than a thing upon which I live my life. It's something that's alive. So when I sit down to meditate, I'm a living being connected to a living earth. And so my meditation affects, well, this is something I imagine, my meditation affects the earth, and the earth offers something to the meditation. You know, there's a sort of dialogue that could be possible. I mean, obviously not spoken, but more sort of an energetic dialogue. And I sometimes wonder, you know, if you get little bits of, I don't know, bliss or rapture arising in meditation. I just consider that, I wonder what effect that has on the earth. I wonder whether the earth feels that. And then it can become a sort of offering almost.
I mean, I'm inclined, yes, I think maybe one can go so far as to say, well, you're just the earth manifesting in a particular way. I mean, when we look at a tree or something, it seems quite clear in a way, doesn't it? To me, you know, trees very clearly are manifesting from earth, aren't they? I mean, literally doing that, aren't they? But are we so different, really? You know, we're just, I mean, I don't know if earth is quite the right word, but we're just life manifesting in a particular way, aren't we? And this thinking it's our life, this is my life, it's not quite right, is it? Not your life, is it? It's life manifesting as you.
Well, it's like we have to hold a sort of koan, don't we? Because you know, in a way, it is your life and your agency, and you choose, and also it's not as well, and they're both true.
No, both true. Yeah. I've never quite got that. The only bit I'm saying maybe about it that we choose. I've never quite sorted that out in my own mind, how much we choose anything. But to me, we choose. You know, we've got free will until we make a choice. You know, we've only got free will as projected into the future, if you like. Once we've made a decision, retrospectively, we couldn't have done anything else. That makes sense. Doesn't really make sense, does it?
Well, maybe we shouldn't go down the huge hole of free will, and we'll never come out.
We imaginatively we've got free will, haven't we? We're experiencing
experientially, that's what it feels like. That's what it feels like. Yeah. Whether that's the case or not, you know, maybe we don't go there.
Have you got anything you want to say about how you're talking about the earth as a living thing? And I wonder if you've got any thing about how that's personified for you, or how we can personify that in a way that connects us more strongly with it.
mm.
Or is that necessary, or is it just
Yeah, it's quite a big question, isn't it?
it's quite a big question? Yeah, the one that
I mean,
avoided. Well, it could be avoided.
so it's something I've been very interested in for quite a long time now. Is just this whole area of animism and what difference it might make if we relate to the world as alive, the whole of it. And in a way, it's more of a question for me, more of a sort of a point of reflection, because I don't think, I mean, Sangharakshita talks about that very interestingly, but kind of briefly in when he looks at the elements section in the Satipatthana Sutta, and in a way I feel like it just really could do with unpacking. But I suppose the issue is how do you develop? It's almost like we're trying to do something without any teachers, because culturally we're so cut off. How do you cultivate a sense of everything being alive? I mean, I'm taking it as read that I think it's really important that we do, and I think the damage that we do is a reflection of our relationship, a sort of dysfunctional relationship, and I'd see animism as a more functional relationship. But for myself, I mean, I guess this whole area of personification, it's like the psyche does what it wants, doesn't it? And I think it can and does personify, but I don't know whether you can make it happen. So it's certainly there's something there for me where it feels like it personifies. I definitely have a strong sense of the goddess, which would be a very traditional figure for say Gaia, for the entirety of the world. Yeah, I mean, my shrine is basically an image of the world from space, so there's something that's very significant there for me. And actually, just even mentioning that image, I mean, you're probably very familiar with it. It's often called the blue marble image, a sort of NASA sort of composite image of the Earth that NASA put together. Quite often bring that into retreats, and it's interesting because it's like it almost changes the atmosphere immediately, and people are immediately in relationship with it, and it's like we know nobody can be neutral about that image. Makes me wonder whether we need to personify it. Actually, now we've got that image, we've only had it for 50 years, haven't we?
Yeah. Is it 50 years? Yeah.
Maybe a bit more, 70s, I'm thinking, maybe. Yeah.
Was that really moving little, it's an old one now, I remember what it's called, a little documentary where they interview all these different astronauts and cosmonauts, and they're all talking about their experience of looking at the Earth from outer space, and very moving little film. I was thinking while you're talking, of course, you're at Tara Local, aren't you? So you're in that realm, aren't you? That's a personification, isn't it? And I don't know how traditional it is, but certainly within Sri Ratna, I think Tara has as a bodhisattva, has to some extent become the earth goddess, hasn't she? In Sri Ratna, well, it's not official, is it? But certainly on Buddha field retreats, and I'm sure other retreats as well. I think quite often we relate to her as if she is divine feminine earth, don't we? You know.
I think that might be quite inevitable in a way. I mean, my understanding of her origins, anyway. You know, come from Drudha, the Indian earth goddess. So she's actually kind of, if a mythological being can have a historical origin, she comes out of the earth goddess, and in a way, certainly for me, I can't really differentiate. I mean, her classic form is green. You know, it's life, isn't it? I mean, I like a while ago I learned about Hildegard of Bingen. She talked about viriditas. She talked about this sort of sacred greening, or sacred, sort of divine life. I think she, you know, in a way, I think I can't help feeling she's talking about something similar.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it does seem that the sort of more mystic end of most traditions have a lot of resonance with each other. I've had. I mean, I'm interested in whether, did you know, Chandradasa was talking about your love of trees. And this might sound a ridiculous question, but no, I'm sure it won't sound ridiculous to you. But I mean, do you ever feel that you have a direct communication with trees?
I don't know whether I don't know how to answer that. I don't know whether I do. I don't feel I'm the sort of person who has that sort of sensitivity, and yet I keep coming back to the same things. So something in me does. I don't know. I mean, partly I did these sitting, you know, meditating with tree videos. In a way, partly it was for my benefit to sit under trees and just, in a way, see what it was like. I don't know whether I had that with trees specifically, but it's almost like I said, I keep coming back to the earth. There's something that communicates through the earth, and maybe it communicates up through living beings on the earth. But there's something. There's some sort of power, isn't there, that comes through. And in a way, I suppose when I think about my practice, I think, well, in a way, it's both an offering, but maybe it's an expression of something else. It's not. I mean, it's sort of to do with me, but it's sort of not really.
No.
Yeah. And in a way, I'd see more that there's a sort of there's this possibility, isn't there? And well, maybe an actuality of a world that's awakening. I mean, it is awakening. It is awakening. It's a mess, and it's awakening, and it's got to express itself somehow. And you know, you and I and everyone else are part of that, but maybe only a small part.
Quite small, yeah. I mean, compared to fungus or something.
Well, they're basically in charge, yeah. That's something that delighted me reading Merlin Sheldrake's book about fungi a few months ago, which is a delight. I'd recommend that book. I think it's called Entangled Life. Is after a while you realise no matter how much damage we do through our foolishness, we will never kill fungi. I felt so delighted by that. Apparently some live in Chernobyl power station. They just learnt to feed on radioactivity. It's so cool.
But it's so interesting, you know, we know this, of course, but it's just all these different layers of life, isn't there? We're kind of on this, we're on a big scale, aren't we? You know, we're quite gigantic, but even us, I don't know, you know, I've been quite taken by Timothy Merton's work, you know, where one of his big things is to try and deconstruct the human being, you know. He's saying, well, of course, human beings are much more than just human beings, you know. This whole world of microbes and all sorts of things, you know, our whole environment. And again, I mean, I see this, it's so interesting, isn't it? You know, we had the Buddha sitting under this tree. I don't know, for me, I'm always coming back to this image of the Buddha sitting under a tree. And it seems fundamental to me that that's telling us. And when we see I mean, it's easy to see, isn't it? When we see a big tree, I mean, all trees, but particularly if we see like a big oak tree or something, it's so obvious that's a world unto itself, isn't it? All the insects and the birds and everything, you know, and it's just like, we're just like that, aren't we? We're both ourselves, we're both discrete in a sense, but in another sense, totally undiscrete. And so in the human part of us is a relatively small part of us in a sense.
Well, I think we're an ecosystem, aren't we? You're an ecosystem, and I'm an ecosystem of all sorts of different things. I was reading recently. We've each got our own little microbial cloud around us that's quite personal to us. So we don't realise it, but we walk in this sort of fog of microbes. Yeah. So I think it's just this whole area of like we're just not what we think we are. We're on so many levels. We're not what we think we are. We're not individuals. We're ecosystems, and we're not separate. We're participative in. And I think something that interests me, because I think it affects Buddhism, is Buddhism still very anthropocentric, and I've got a bit of a thing at the moment about how it's like we need to get, this is a bit like it would be the human equivalent of getting the individual getting beyond the self. I think humanity needs to get beyond itself a bit and
over itself.
It needs to get over itself, and actually we need to decenter ourselves. We keep placing ourselves central, and we're not. We're not in all sorts of ways. We're not, and maybe I think that's what trees do. Actually, it's many things, but that's one of the things trees do. You know, you're just with a big tree, and it's just been around so much longer than you, and it decenters you.
Yeah.
It takes the center, doesn't it? Actually, it's interesting, isn't it? Because of course the Buddha, when he's sitting under the Bodhi tree, it was the center of the world, and it's like the tree stands at the tree of life, the world tree stands at the center of the world, and you come into relationship with it, but you're not that.
No, it's very clear, it seems to me, in Buddhism, the tree is prior to the Buddha, isn't it? You know, in a sense, the tree is this symbol, you know, and the Buddha takes his place under that tree. But the tree itself is an explanation of the Dharma, if you like, the Buddhist teachings, you know. In symbolically, you know, it breaks down the dualism between form and formlessness, if you like.
I thought you were going to say earth and sky then, but say more about form and formlessness.
I could have said that. I could I would normally probably say earth and sky, but I think these days I also think, well, they stand for form and formlessness, you know. And they also stand for how form becomes formless and how emptiness becomes form, you know. But that's another story, isn't it? I don't know. Maybe that's well. No, I don't think it's going too far at all. But yeah, we don't want to get too metaphysical, do we?
Well, maybe. I mean, what I was saying about going beyond a sort of anthropocentrism. I mean, in a way, it's moving from a certain form to something more formless, isn't it? Anything that moves you from something fixed to something open.
Mm.
That movement, I suppose, is something we're working with the whole time, isn't it?
The whole time, yeah. I think so. Well, potentially, yeah. In every moment, we've got that choice, haven't we? Sort of close down, or to center ourselves. I suppose for me these days, you know what? When I'm thinking about meditation, I'm thinking that most of us in a sort of industrialized West, we're centered here, aren't we? You know, we're kind of centered in our cranium, or somehow we experience ourselves as somehow got a little, what do you call a little person? You know,
Homunculus.
Homunculus. We've got a little homunculus, and it's in our skull. Like there used to be in that comic, and that a little anyway. But actually, it's in the wrong place. It needs, you know, it needs to be in the heart. You know, it needs. We need to start reimagining. You know, people talk about getting rid of the self. Well, that's another story. I mean, I don't even know what that means. You know, but I think we can recenter. You know, you were talking about decentering ourselves. I think that's true, but I think perhaps it's also about recentering. Like if we center in the heart, that naturally tends towards opening. But I think if we're up here, if we're centered up here, that naturally tends towards the opposite, I think, closing down. I'm not saying you can't have a mental insight. You can, but it's very hard for it not to be immediately appropriated, I think. You know, so you get a brilliant idea, don't you? It's your idea, isn't it? You have a really strong emotion, it just blows that out of water, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This is I don't know how you feel about that, but
yeah. Well, in a way, you're touching on. So there's a couple of thoughts I'm having. One is you're describing a movement in the body, but in a way, I'm also describing the same movement sort of externally, or from the self to the world. You know, we're talking about movement from the head to the body, from the head, which is, you know, the intelligent human being, to the world, to the body. It's the same movement. And I think, and then the other thing that was coming up for me was just around assimilation of insight, I suppose, of understanding, which I guess is something I've been thinking about for years now, is how do you ground? In a way, ground is the word for it, isn't it? How do you ground understanding into the body and into the world? You know, how do you take some sort of insight and move it into the cells of your being, into the soma, or out into the fabric of the world? How do you do that? So I suppose that's just it's a sort of so just a question that I wonder about most of the time, really. Yeah.
Well, you know, you sit under a tree, don't you? That's the image we're given, isn't it? We sit under a tree. That's how we do it. We sit under a tree.
Yeah.
And I mean, in a way, that sounds much too simplistic, but I actually more and more think probably for most people, the most useful thing they can do as meditators is to learn to really relax the lower body and make a proper connection with Earth, you know. And somehow I think that allows some kind of, you know, coming back to what you were talking about, is you're actually in an active, imaginative, energetic interchange with the world. It's a felt thing, isn't it? It becomes a felt thing rather than an idea. Something you can actually feel in your body, whether it's literally true, whatever that means, I don't know, but it's psychically true. It's psychically possible, isn't it? I think it's psychically. I mean, I've had this experience myself. I think it's psychically possible to communicate with the vegetative intelligence of the Earth. But, yeah, there is this kind of vegetative nervous system, and you can, and quite often it is done through a certain personification of that. You enter it through a personification. But this bothers me slightly with Buddhism. Most of our personifications are floating about in the sky, aren't they?
That's what I was going to say, actually, just as you were talking. I was thinking that connection downwards, I find really interesting. And yet, if I think of most of the Buddhist meditations that I'm familiar with, I mean, there's the lovely sort of bodhicitta practice, which is a heart opening out to the world. But then there's a lot of relationship with the vertical, you know, sort of sense of blessings coming down. But that sense of, in a way, blessings rising up or something rising up from below doesn't seem to be there so much. And I was kind of interested, it's something I was wanting to ask you, because I know we haven't got very long, by the way, just to say that, but I know you're very interested in shamanism. And in a way, I suppose I think of that as the sort of, in a way, this area, the communication downwards. And I don't know whether is that how you see it, and is that your experience? I mean, what, you know, in a way, what is the interest there for you?
What's the interest for me? God, I don't know how I can sum it up, really. I mean, it's not an intellectual thing, you know, though, you know, I could say something about it conceptually, but it's much more like, I feel it opens up a possibility of a direct dialogue with organic world. In the plants have psyche, I suppose. I believe that plants have psyche, and I think certain shamanic practices give you access to that. Invite that psyche in. That there can be a direct communication. Of course, you can't conceptualize it really. Once you move into that, you lose it. But experientially, you can be in communication with the psyche of plants or earth. I don't know how you put it really. And I think they are much on the whole. Well, right from the Greek, you know, because of course the Greek mysteries were shamanic. I mean, that was coming up, you know, the Delphic oracle or whatever. That's coming up from underneath, you know. You know, that's coming up into the body from underneath. That's why she sat on a tripod, isn't it? You know, it actually comes out it enters through the vagina. You know, the oracle, you know, the energy. That's why she's on a tripod, you know. And so we think of shamanic people, you know, Mongolian or Peruvian, but the Greek tradition was a shamanic tradition, really, you know, pre-Socratic anyway. Well, post-Socratic, whatever. The mysteries, and I think this is it. The people do, and I think now we try and get to that for art, don't we? Perhaps more. But you know, people want direct experience. They want to taste the world. I think. They want to digest and be digested by it in a way.
So I suppose the question for me is, in a way, because I mentioned assimilation earlier, and you're talking about digestion. In a way, we're talking about something similar. Is how Buddhism in the West does that. Because I suppose I still feel like we're trying to find out how it does that. That we're trying to, in a way, I think maybe there is some sort of synthesis or some sort of interchange that needs to happen between something maybe more shamanic that's based in, or pagan, that's based in this land, in this culture, in our bodies.
Or punk.
Sorry?
Or punk even.
Punk?
Yeah, like punk rock, punk. That was sort of shamanic, wasn't it? Oh, shamanic tradition. That's a shamanic tradition popping up in the modern world.
I've never heard anyone say that before.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Anyway, just to say, we've got like about 5 minutes, which you can riff on punk.
I don't need to say more about it. I'm not a huge punk. Like, all this thing, music's very shamanic in a way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or can be, Classical music again tends to be a bit up there, doesn't it? Exclusive classical music. The thing was, punk was participatory again, and the mysteries were participating. Shamanic practice is participatory, where Western culture got a tendency to, we don't participate now, we go and watch music, don't we? Classical music. We're not doing it anymore. So it's a different thing, it's sort of, well, I won't go down that route, because I want to come back to what you were saying, because I think it's so important. And I don't know, like me, the thing that attracted me to the Western Buddhist order, when we were the Western Buddhist order, was that Sangharakshita's vision of finding a Western expression for Buddhism. Now, personally, and perhaps this is related to what you're saying, I think we're just at the beginning of that process. We're just making little baby steps.
Yeah.
We've been around for 60 years or however long the order's been around. Not quite that. And it's just, and what we've got to be careful about, if we don't shut it down, if we've sorted out now, we've been doing this.
Yeah.
Because we're just at the beginning.
I don't think we haven't even started.
Okay,
yeah.
But even at the beginning.
Yeah, but well, I think that's partly what I'm trying to do with my little nature videos. I don't know whether it works, but one of the things I was thinking is just even this whole process of translating our understanding of Buddhism into the world around us. It's like often what I hear people do is they try to get things to represent other things. So a yellow daffodil kind of represents the color of the yellow Buddha Ratnasambhava, and therefore means generosity. And I suppose I just sort of think, if we kind of got more intimate with the world around us as it is, we wouldn't need to kind of do all of those steps. You just see a tree and you'd think awakening, you'd see yellow and think love or whatever, Yeah.
A yellow daffodil is generosity, isn't it?
Well, that's it. It is in itself. So there's something about, that's what I mean about things not representing things, but they are in themselves. So, and in that way of thinking, then actually things become sacred.
Yeah.
They're already sacred, and you notice the sacred dimension of them. You notice their qualities rather than have to have them stand for something else that is sacred. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important. And
So I'm aware, Paramount. I have to keep an eye on the time, and I think we're nearly sort of just to let you know, we're pretty much at time.
But this to me, you know, what we haven't got time to unpack. I hate that expression, unpack. It's horrible, isn't it? I don't use that expression. We haven't got time to talk about it. But the relationship between insight and beauty,
Yeah.
I think it's so important, isn't it? It's not a optional extra beauty, you know.
Mm.
It's like that poem you started with. We now had a certain beauty in it, didn't it? And that can you have gratitude without beauty? I don't think so, can you? Well,
No, well, it's a question, isn't it? It's a question.
but I think
doubt
it's so. Anyway, I'm getting a bit lost there because I don't want to lose your point about that whole thing that, you know, a flower doesn't stand for something, does it? Well, it can be made to stand for something, but actually it's the actual quality of the flower, isn't it?
Mm.
Anyway, fantastic. Thank you so much, Mike, Dave. I really have enjoyed talking to you, actually.
Oh, it's lovely, yeah.
We'll have you back if we do another. I don't know. Probably get, you know, be like D time. You know, we never hear of it again. You don't know what that.
I don't know what that is.
Simon D. This E-Type Jaguar. Simon D. He was this big chat show host that just suddenly just disappeared and nobody's ever heard of him again.
Right.
So, but anyway, if we get a chance, I'll definitely invite you back because we'll just scratch the surface a little bit there. But
yeah, we have. Yeah.
Lovely to speak to you, really.
Mm. Likewise. Yeah.
Keep up the great work. You know, what a lovely fit you and I mean, what you're talking about seem. I mean, and you're in the realm of Tara. You know, you're in the Loka, Tara Loka. You know. Perfect, isn't it?
Well, I'm very lucky. Very lucky.
You got it all there. You got the bog, and you just down a lane there. You got that lovely. Is it called a bog? It is a bog, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a peat bog. Yeah.
Peat bog, yeah. And are they, just to check in now, are they gone? Is it climate? Why have the swallows not come back? Do we know?
Well, they've been in population decline since the 70s, and then they're kind of they're gonna have problems if there's any big shifts in conditions. And a couple of years ago, we had some quite bad conditions for swallows, and I just don't think any of the ones that were here made it back.
No.
I think they all died, and
the same ones come back to the same place every year.
Yeah, so I think if you lose them, that's it. Unless they have a big boom year and there's some overspill. But I think we've lost them for good. Yeah, it's just awful. It's gutting. Yeah.
Guys, what's it? We've done a full circle because I started off after that poem feeling quite tearful and talk about the swallows there again. You know, I can feel that I'm welling up a bit. And it's God. You know, there's so much love needed in the world, isn't there?
Yeah. So you just end up with a thank you, don't you? We say thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely to talk to you, Paramanda.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Thanks to both of you. On behalf of everybody, lots of thanks appearing in the chat. I feel we're so lucky actually just to be able to do this and to just to witness people who are prepared to show up and be vulnerable and intimate with each other in a way and about the things that matter most. it feels very fortunate to be part of a community that encourages that. And yeah, Maitri, I think we have to have you back. Let's do a series or something. that was pretty fabulous, and there's so much you could go into further. Yeah, so and thanks to Paramananda, yeah, just for holding the space so well, for sort of coaxing it into being, coaxing it back out of being at the end. It's really lovely. If you are interested in doing stuff around nature, we're going to be partnering with Danakosha Retreat Centre in May for 3 Saturdays. They're going to lead meditations outdoors in the Highlands. They're going to take us for micro adventures in the hills, all sorts of interesting stuff. You can find out about it there. And before you leave, you can download the chat from this event if you want to get all the links, but we will send out a bunch of links afterwards. So as usual, to round off, feel free to unmute yourselves if you'd just like to thank our guests themselves as you take your leave, and then we'll all drift back into the ether.
It was lovely. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Paramananda, Maitri Devi. Brilliant.
Thank you. Thanks, Paramananda and Maitri Devi. It was gorgeous.
Lovely, moving, tender, delicate conversation. Thank you so much.